Welcome to a new video where we go through some of the psychological topics of meaning and motivation. A little sidetrack today though, seeing as we are now looking at a paper called Disease-Resistant Personality. Let's start this here. This is a paper by Lee Smith, and it is doing it live, as they say. And this is a chapter in a book, chapter 4, in Mind, Body, Health, the effects of attitudes, emotions, and relationships. And this text is looking, just as an introduction, at well-known effects of stress over time that's causing illnesses, and this is also well known among most people, that stress over time, as opposed to short-term stress, affects health negatively. And, quote, they found that the stressor itself was not nearly as important to who suffered illness as were the attitudes the people had towards the stressor and the approach they took to deal with it. Meaning, it's not the stress itself that causes illness, but how we react or act towards the stressful situation. Further quote, many of the factors she, being Kubasa, identified were part of personality. Meaning personality could indeed determine the impact of stress on health, and twin studies shows that about half of your personality is genetically influenced and about half is learned. So that means that certain personality types handle stress better. And in the second quote here we can see that half of the personality is learned, meaning it can be changed. So this tells us we can possibly change aspects of our personality to be more stress resilient, if you will, or getting the positive side of it if we want to. And in this context, it is in this text is describes how even better living conditions like better food, housing, health services, sickness will in some cases increase. Quote, they felt powerless. They gave in. Curiously, when people give in to their struggles, their immune system, which usually protects them from disease, like tuberculosis, also gives in. Meaning this then becomes a mentally created disease, which also means we can mentally, by changing how we react, our mentality, we can also, if you will, get away from disease, to put simply. And this also shows that it is how they reacted to the situation. So this was a case of people being moved from where they lived to another place, and they reacted negatively to this, and that caused them to not increase their health, even though the physical conditions should make them have better health. Some people who have been forcibly moved did not get sick in the new living conditions. Quote, why? Rather than seeing this as an upheaval and negative, which was the other case, they viewed their new lives as an opportunity and a challenge. So the mentality of the change or the move was more of a positive. I can start over, or I can learn from this, having more of a positive effect on health than negative. So I would assume then that even if a move to a different place where the health conditions, physical conditions, were worse or the same, health conditions with this attitude would still change to the better. Some aspects of personality, well-being and health. In regards to personality in relation to health, quote, they concluded that with a good attitude and an ability to get along with other people, enjoyed the lowest frequency of illness. In other words, resilience is a greater determining factor than the stressor itself. So, and yes, these are aspects of resilience, to get along with other people, to, as in other words, finding resources to better function in the environment you are in and the conditions you live in, are resilience factors. And thus, with these resilience factors, you have a lesser chance of becoming ill, maybe even actually prevent illness in the situation that other people normally would get ill from. Some key components that will improve well-being in the face of stress includes caring love, being committed to the fulfillment of others, which is a social aspect. This kind of relates to another book I've read, which is called The Social Cure, which shows that people in older age that retain and maintain social groups that they frequently socialize with lived significantly longer than the people in the old age that just didn't, if you will, sat at home or did whatever else. Responsible free will, as in creating your own life experience and influencing events. So taking conscious actions and choices as opposed to just going with the flow, if you will, and reacting to the situation, whatever the first reaction is. Integrity, being true to your core values. And challenge, enjoying growth, looking at failure as something to learn and a challenge to learn from, as opposed to something that you failed at. A very good example of that one. Challenge as positive as opposed to a hindrance. And finally, hope, the feeling of positive expectation, like focusing on a positive simply. And here comes the exception to the norm. Referring to a study, some people who become successful despite of bad upbringing, quote, what were the common elements in those who did well? According to Kobasa, it's hardiness, being a set of belief about oneself, the world, and how they interact. It takes the shape of a sense of personal commitment to what you are doing, a sense of control of your life, and a sense of challenge. Again, quote, excitement then is critical because boredom puts people at a high risk of disease, also in low energy, which kind of explains that one. People who are constructively challenged are more healthy. One German philosopher mused that one of the biggest foes of human happiness is boredom. Excitement and, as a result, challenge surrounds the good kind of stress, or eustress, that improves health. So being excited to learn and to the change, getting new experience, something, that's kind of the good kind of stress, or the good reaction to stress, you might say. This is from the C, one of the C's of challenge, that Kobasa's 3 C's for hardiness. So you defined 3 C's, being commitment, control, and challenge. The other two is commitment, which involves a deep sense of purpose and meaning, both to one's life, work, and to what's happening in the moment. So, and the last one is control. Quote, we all crave a sense of mastery, but the only way to feel that mastery is to stop blaming external events for controlling your life, feelings, or behaviors, and to expect responsibility to how you respond. In other words, changing from the external locus of control to the internal locus of control. Because you cannot really control external events, but you can control how you react to external events, how you and what emotions to focus on, and everything that happens inside of your body, more or less. At least to a much greater degree than external events. Like, you can somehow influence other people's behavior, but not if they don't want to. Some studies and examples. Quote, in a comprehensive year-long study of college students, researchers at Boston University School of Medicine concluded that a definite series of events precedes illness. And here's what they believe happens. A person perceives a distressing situation. For whatever reason, he or she is not able to resolve the distressing situation effectively. As a result, the person feels helpless, hopeless, and anxious. Those feelings of lack of control weakens the immune system, and thus the resistance to disease. Finally, the person becomes more vulnerable to disease-causing agents that are always in the environment. So, how you react to the situation in a negative manner, and this snowball kind of goes towards that direction if you don't stop it in time, and then you just kind of open yourself up to the disease elements that is always there. Kind of like a cold, in a sense, which is not really understood in the correct way, but that's another topic. A new quote, Kobasa and Maddie began training the stressed telephone executive in hardiness. That is, they began helping them develop a disease-resistant personalities. Or not a disease-resistant personalities. Specific health benefits came to the people who received the training. They not only enjoyed more job satisfaction, but also had a reduced anxiety, less depression, fewer physical ills such as headaches, lower blood pressure, and better sleep. So this is a good example that shows that you can train yourself to develop a disease-resistant personality, and for that matter, if there's other aspects of your personality that you can want to change to become a better person, develop better responses, if you will, that is also possible. But you have to have a good reason to want this. And other ways to getting a hardening personality. I think this is the last slide. One way to change how we think into a more hardy personality that Kobasa describes is this. Start by mentally recalling a stressful event that happens to you. The more stressful, the better. The more recent, the better. Rehearse the whole thing in your mind and concentrate on remembering as many details as you can. Now, write down 3 ways the event could have been worse. You might even feel some gratitude that it did not turn out this way or in this worse way. Finally, you write down 3 ways it could have been better. In other words, what could you have done to improve the situation? What did you learn? This is one of several other suggestions on how to become more hardy, and these are very similar to several NLP methods and tools. And this method that is described here is in many ways, or is very similar to how many of the NLP techniques actually is, and is actually very similar to one other. So this is almost like an NLP technique to look at the past event, to learn from it and resolve the issue you have with it, so it will not affect you negatively in the future. This was the last of this one. This is just this was the most interesting aspect of this paper that I wanted to present in this video. If you want to read it in full for yourself, you will find this paper easily by just searching for the disease-resistant personality. There I found many places where you can download it if you want to and read it. Thanks for watching. I hope you found value in this video, and I'll see you in the next one. I see many people that lack motivation as a result of not enough meaning in their lives. You might wonder what meaning has to do with motivation. My bachelor's paper shows that what people consider meaningful is also what they consider important. And if something is important enough, we will do it. This tells me that meaning is important for motivation. Tom Bailu, among others, have stated, quote, "Humans are meaning-making machines." My goal here is to help people learn more about themselves and help them find a long-term meaningful goal in life. So if you have not found your interest and struggle with motivation, you might want to visit my website at whori.org and see if this is for you. Which is here. You can either contact me here or look around and see if it's for you, and if it still is, you can contact me here. Or if you want to know more, you can click this link to schedule a call. I am located in Norway, and if you want a physical meeting with me, that can be arranged, and my Norwegian website is kenreg.org, which looks more or less the same. And with that, I wish you well on your journey.